اليوم فاتح على حسابه حزب الله.
Good afternoon, you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, and these are today's headlines. The power vacuum and the reactivation of Parliament top the agenda of today's 16th dialogue session between MPs in Ain al-Sine. Information ministers of the Saudi-led Gulf Cooperation Council take a series of measures to prevent cooperations with TV channels affiliated to Hezbollah or its leaders. And Washington warns it will take action against Iran if the news that Tehran fired long-range ballistic missile tests is confirmed. The power vacuum and the reactivation of Parliament were the two main points which topped the agenda of the 16th dialogue session, as the meeting witnessed a heated debate between Foreign Minister Gebran Bassil and MP Sleiman Frangieh over the presidential elections. However, following the meeting, Bassil tweeted, quote, "No dispute happened during the dialogue session, and obstructing the quorum of presidential election sessions is a constitutional right as long as the national pact and the people's voices are impeded." His tweet prompted a swift response by Marada movement leader Frangieh, who emphasized that no one can monopolize the Christian representation and exclude us. Tensions have been high between Frangieh and his longtime ally Michel Aoun, founder of the FPM, since Future movement leader Saad Hariri endorsed the former in November. While most party leaders attended the meeting, Aoun was absent from the talks, along with Progressive Socialist Party leader Walid Jumblat, who is currently in Paris. Health Minister Wael Abou Fahour has ordered for the closure of a vitamin supplement company and the withdrawal of all of its products across Lebanon after it was found violating health and legal standards. After inspecting the manufacturing plant of the company Lifelong in the eastern town of Zahle, the ministry discovered that as well as storing the products in unsanitary ways, some supplements were expired and the dates of others were changed. The ministry also discovered that Lifelong was violating the decree that regulates the import, sale and packaging of the supplements and natural products. Separately, Abou Fahour called for the closure of a dump site in the Bika'a Valley town of Bar Liez after it was deemed a danger to the health of local residents. The request was made after Abou Fahour received several complaints from local citizens and upon a request from the Health Emergency Committee, who inspected the site. Information ministers of the Saudi-led Gulf Cooperation Council have taken a series of measures against Hezbollah following the GCC's blacklisting of the party last week. During a meeting they held in Riyadh, the ministers decided to take all legal measures to prevent cooperation with TV channels affiliated to Hezbollah or its leaders. A statement issued following the meeting said Hezbollah seeks to stir strife and incite chaos and violence. The ministers stressed that legal measures apply to production companies, producers, and all that falls under the umbrella of the media. The move by the Saudi-led bloc of 6 Gulf nations last Wednesday came less than 2 weeks after Saudi Arabia announced it was cutting $4 billion in aid to the Lebanese army and security forces. UN Syria envoy Staffan de Mistura says Syria's cessation of hostilities is open-ended in the view of the United Nations and the major powers, brushing off a widespread perception that the truce needed renewing after 2 weeks. De Mistura plans to launch substantive peace talks on Monday and said they will focus on the core issues of governance, elections within 18 months, and a new constitution.
But then we plan to start having informal talks already, hotels or here, with whoever is arriving. But the substantive, deeper part of it, after the first preparation, will be on Monday, God willing, the 14th. They will last not beyond the 24th. We believe that having a timetable and a time limit is healthy for everyone, so we don't think that we can go on procedural discussion for 2 weeks hoping to get into substance. We go seriously into substance as soon as we can. When we start having the talks on Monday, God willing, the focus will be on substance, on the agendas. In other words, on new governance, constitution and elections the future elections in 18 months' time, both presidential and parliamentarian. The issue about ceasefire and the humanitarian, in theory, and we hope in practice, should not be addressed by the talks, because we do have the two task forces who are going to be simultaneously addressing those, and therefore taking away the alibi, in a way, of those who may want only to talk about ceasefire, and forgetting that at the end of the day, ceasefire and humanitarian aid alone are not a solution. The solution is a political transition in Syria, facilitated, made it credible to the Syrian people by an incremental humanitarian assistance and an incremental, more or less sustainable, we hope as much as possible, and quite unbelievable after 5 years of war, the cessation of hostilities or reduction of hostilities.
U.S. Vice President Joe Biden says the United States will take action against Iran if long-range ballistic missile tests Tehran said it carried out were confirmed. Biden was speaking during a visit to Israel and the Palestinian territories. Iran reportedly fired 2 more long-range ballistic missiles as it continued military tests in defiance of U.S. sanctions and fresh warnings from Washington. Coming just weeks after the implementation of Iran's historic nuclear deal with world powers, this week's multiple missile tests were described by Iran's powerful revolutionary guards as a show of force in the face of U.S. pressure. After similar tests on Tuesday, Washington warned it could raise the issue with the UN Security Council and take further action after U.S. sanctions were imposed in connection with Iran's missile program in January. And coming up next, some exclusive images of yesterday's solar eclipse. Stay with us. Welcome back. Migrants are still making the perilous journey from Greece to Turkey on smugglers' boats. Despite patrols by NATO, Macedonia closing its border, and a decision by Turkey to take back those who cross from its shores, UNHCR has criticized the plans drawn up by Turkey and the EU, saying they would amount to a violation of human rights. Aid agencies and doctors have also warned that living conditions in the Greek border camp of Idomeni were deteriorating, and they said fear this could lead to a disease outbreak. Thousands of men, women, and children have been stranded at the dismal makeshift camp after border restrictions imposed along the Balkan migration route allowed only a trickle of migrants to cross over to Macedonia in the past 2 weeks.
Well, it's a pretty hard life right now. The people pay thousands of euros to come to Greece, and then they're kind of hit at a wall. As you can see around, there's standing water. There are just small tents that have been blown over. We're finally getting some bigger tents in, but there's not enough staff here to take care of all the needs of the people. The antibiotics, but we're really worried about outbreak conditions, potential for measles, cholera, polio, that sort of thing. But the most common condition is just a basic cough and cold, body aches, a little gastroenteritis.
And conditions are just getting worse as expected, but these people are here because they don't see another choice for them. There is no going back for them as refugees, and there's no going forward for them as well. So there needs to be a solution for them, which needs to be found very quickly. Our concern is the blanket return of people who are seeking international protection in Europe. It cannot be done just sending everyone back, so there needs to be some safeguards under international instruments, principles and obligations that states have in EU.
Actually, we were waiting for Germany to do something, because this is how the things go normally. We heard in the meeting of Europe, we heard that Merkel said no borders will be closed. So that's why we are waiting. If not, okay, tell us what we have to do. We have no other area to go, no other place. I prefer to die here and not go to Damascus, because I'm wanted there. They taking the young people to the military in force to fight. Otherwise, you are going to be killed or to kill, and this both is not my options.
Border is closed. We don't know what time it's opened. we are feel too tired. All people feel tired, and what we don't know what we're doing.
Now for some U.S. election news. Bernie Sanders has defeated Hillary Clinton in a close vote in Michigan State, breathing new life into his White House bid. Clinton, however, breezed to an easy victory in Mississippi, propelled by overwhelming support from black voters, and she now has more than half the delegates she needs to clinch the Democratic nomination. In winning Mississippi, exit polls showed Clinton winning 9 of every 10 black voters. The World Health Organization says public health measures need to be taken in Zika-affected areas, and women should be given enough information to help them decide on whether or not to become pregnant due to the potential risk of birth defects. WHO explained that sexual transmission is relatively common, and health services in Zika-affected areas should be ready for potential increases in case of neurological syndromes.
It is important that every country, including Brazil in this case, or especially Brazil in this case, we're reporting so many infections, that women should be provided with all the information to empower them to make the decision whether they want to get pregnant or whether they want to defer pregnancy. And, if indeed they are already pregnant, there are other means to protect themselves from mosquito bite. Clearly, Zika infection during pregnancy will produce very bad outcomes. And so it is important that we recommend strong public health measures, not to wait until we have the definitive proof. Microcephaly is now only one of several documented birth abnormalities associated with Zika infection during pregnancy. Grave outcomes including fetal death, placental insufficiency, fetal growth retardation, and injury to the central nervous system. To date, microcephaly has been documented in only 2 countries, French Polynesia and Brazil. However, intense surveillance for fetal male abnormalities is currently underway in countries like Colombia, where the outbreaks started later than in Brazil. The geographical spread of the disease is wider, the risk group is broader, and the modes of transmission now include sexual intercourse as well as mosquito bites. Local transmission has now been reported in 31 countries and territories in Latin America and the Caribbean. In this region, cases of dengue, which is carried by the same mosquito species as Zika, typically increase during the rainy season, and which lasts from January to May. We can expect to see more cases and further geographical spread.
A NASA camera has captured the total solar eclipse which occurred yesterday, and the agency published an animation showing the path of the moon's shadow as it passed across the Earth. Those living in a small band of Indonesia were positioned perfectly to see the eclipse, with Ternate Island in prime position. A partial eclipse was visible to millions in Australia, parts of Southeast Asia, and the Pacific. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a recap of our top stories. The power vacuum and the reactivation of Parliament top the agenda of today's 16th dialogue session between MPs in Hainatsine. Information ministers of the GCC take a series of measures to prevent cooperation with TV channels affiliated to Hezbollah or its leaders. And Washington warns it will take action against Iran if the news that Tehran fired long-range ballistic missile tests is confirmed. Those are your top stories for today. I'm Linda Tamim signing off.
واليوم فتح على حسابه حزب الله.